I don't mean to scare you, or maybe I do. I'm not quite sure. But this is the kind of thing that we are giving out by default every day, every minute, effectively. Now, we can't stop giving out all this information, but we can certainly reduce it. So let's look at some ways of doing that. Also, what permissions do the sites we visit have? What do they do with our information? Have you ever thought of checking? Because we are constantly online, we are giving out information at an actually a very scary rate. So go to something like this. Ah, yes. So the interesting thing with incognito mode is, I know we keep saying that it is incognito mode is beautiful and it saves a lot of information from being disclosed, etc., etc., etc. And that is true, as in incognito mode, your information will not be displayed online. But most people don't use incognito mode for that. Most people use incognito mode to reduce the amount of data on their own devices. So you don't want a history stored. You don't want your you don't want a record of the sites you've visited, frequency of the visits to the sites. You assume it's not going to store cookies, those kinds of things, which is actually not true at all. Forensically, all that content can be pulled out. And so using incognito mode is very good if you are going to sites where you don't want them to have your information. But if you are trying to reduce the information on the machine itself, that doesn't work with incognito mode. So as Ashish says, InfoBleed will not find things if you have it in incognito mode. So that's always a good thing. But it's not a sure shot method. So when we are using devices, when we are using apps, when we are using browsers, we need to know what kind of permissions and what kind of data these contain, or what kind of data these preserve. So one of the most interesting organizations that exists on the internet is this one called TOSDR. And TOSDR stands for Terms of Service Didn't Read, which is basically what all of us do on the internet. One pop-up comes, have you read this info? Of course, we say yes, and we go ahead. We've not read a word of the info, except for that small little box which says, have you read this info? So TOSDR is one of the many NGOs that looks at going through permissions, going through what data we give out, what data is collected, and what sites do with our data. So take a look at it. It's good fun. So something else that I would like you to do. Simple basic steps just to cover it. And unfortunately, I am going to give you the first of the basic steps because nobody seems to listen. So there's this lovely little app called O&O Shut Up. It's a very rude name, but it's a brilliant little piece of technology, particularly built for Windows machines. And it will do something very, very simple. It takes care of the permissions that you have on your devices. Now, every time an update comes on Windows, permissions get reset. The most annoying thing on any Windows machine is Cortana. So you can shut things down. You can control what you want to do. And as you can see on your screens, I have specifically selected the privacy tab. So it keeps a record of what you want. So it's going to stop sharing handwriting data. It's going to stop sharing error reports, all kinds of things. Now, these are things that can be pretty scary. And some of this kind of telemetry, we don't even know the machines collect. And did you know that Windows machines are effectively scanning through your data and seeing what you have written? Handwritten data, most of them today have touch screens, so it's checking for whatever is being written with touch screens. Scary stuff. What kind of URLs you visit, all of these kinds of things. So use O&O Shut Up. It's a free tool for the change. Effective, friendly, and it will basically help you tone down the amount of data you are leaking out. Now, For everyone in security, this is our hobby horse effectively. We are obsessed with passwords, and I am sorry, but that is effectively a first line of defense. So, in case you did not know, the Nord password list came out last week, 15 days ago, something like that, which talks about the most popular passwords in the last year. Unfortunately, people still persist on using things like 123456 and password, and let's complicate the password a little bit more. And so they use 12345678. And this is all bad. These passwords don't even take a second to break. But that is one part of the danger, where we willfully, knowingly set bad passwords. The other part of it, and the reality is that a lot of data breaches happen, nothing to be done about it. So go to the site, type in your URL, type in your email address, and see what you get. Does your screen turn red or does your screen turn green? Try it. So let's give you what? 2 minutes to try this. So Rishikesh, green, which is good. Anyone who's got a red screen? So good. 3 people, 2 greens, 1 red is actually a pretty good statistic. So why does it turn red if it turns red? So the green is good. It says that your email address has not been part of any of the breaches. Red is bad, as in some data breach at some point of time contained your email address. Now, I've done this for one of my email addresses, and as you can see, we've got some data breaches that you can see. Now, this is a fairly old screenshot, but we've got one which is 2018. We've got one that is 2016. And as you can see, you've got things like LinkedIn that have been breached. So pretty major data breaches. These are minor things. Now, if it turns red, what do you do? It's very, very simple. If it turns red, just go back and change all the passwords that you have. Nothing else that you need to do. It's not stressful. It's not something that you need to worry about. It is just a very simple thing that you need to do. Also, something that I think is absolutely essential, have two-factor authentication for all your email addresses, whether for all your accounts, in fact, whether it's your email accounts, whether it's banking, whether it's social media, just enable two-factor authentication, which makes life much simpler. Now, if you are thinking about how to make your passwords, what to do with them, one option is that you can check one of these sites, which will possibly tell you how strong your password is. Now, word of caution here, don't put your complete password on it. Don't put the entire password on it. So by that, I mean, if your password is the word PASSWORD 123, preferably don't put that. Put up PASSWORD 789. You don't want to put up your real password even onto these databases, even though they're supposed to be authentic. Partly because security people are paranoid, partly because it's always a good idea. So in addition to all of that, I've put you this little infograph of what good passwords should be like. 10 characters and more, lowercase alphabets, uppercase alphabets, symbols, numbers, a mix of all of them. Some decent passwords will tell you you've got only 1 digit, you need to add another. Some will tell you you've got not enough lowercase, you need to add more. So different passwords will give you different kinds of things. Different settings can be enabled at the server end. So that's something that the server people need to be looking at. But for each of us, this is something we need to do. I also know that I have put two points there that make me very unpopular. I have said change your password every 15 to 20 days. And yes, I would like you to change your password every 15 to 20 days. And yes, I know that you will not do so. And if you change your password once a year, I think that's a good thing, as in at least you're changing your password, but that doesn't make you secure. The second thing that I have put, again, that's going to make you want to beat me up is different passwords for different accounts. And it's not easy. I get it. We've got 30 accounts, 40 accounts, multiple social media accounts. Usually, we will keep the same password for all of them, which is a very, very bad idea. It means that if your Instagram gets breached, your Facebook, Snapchat, everything is getting breached at the same time. If your email gets breached, very likely your banking and everything is going to get breached with it. Solution to this is, again, something that many people are not comfortable with, but it is not very dangerous, or it's a lot less dangerous to be more careful, is what is called, which I somehow don't seem to have a slide of, oops, is what is called a password manager. Now, password managers are good things to use. They are good devices. You can get password managers that are only going to install on your machine and will not sync across devices. You can have password managers that will sync across devices. The nice thing with password managers is it does two things. First, it remembers your passwords, all of them. Two, it reminds you to change your passwords. And as an addition to this reminder, if you feel that you are not able to make a password that is strong enough, it will kindly help you make a nice, strong password. So these are simple things. These are things that you ought to do on a daily basis. Also something that, again, basic paranoid levels of security. You've got the little cameras on your systems. Try and keep them covered. Ideal, piece of paper, fold it over, put sellotape and stick it over your camera. If you want to be fancy, and if this is something that you're going to be opening up every day or something of the kind, you can use one of these things that will help you block your camera screens. So camera lenses, sorry, something like this. It's a small little, let's get it close to you. It's a small little slider. It covers your camera, and when you want to use it, you slide it open. Once you're done, slide it closed. Why am I being so paranoid? So part of it is that the more you learn about cybersecurity, the more paranoid you get. And so let's say that that is the basic reason. But the fact is that particularly on cell phones, all the malware that come have the ability to turn on your cameras and record things. So this is in fact something we have been seeing increasingly. You've got malware that are called stalkerware. I'm going to write the name down. Stalkerware, which are absolutely, unfortunately, legitimate pieces of software that can be installed on a person's device and which will help you stalk this person. Now, please note, stalkerware is illegal. So while it might be a legal piece of software to buy, it is an illegal piece of software to use. So you're welcome to buy it and basically make a chow out of it. But if you use it on anybody else's device, then it's a crime. So with a jail term of about 7 years, I think. 7 or 9, I'm not quite sure, I think 7. But it's dangerous. And stalkerware classically will give you the ability to turn on cameras and turn on mics. So extremely scary stuff, which we are seeing more and more and more of as the days go by. Stalkerware was something that we came across once in a year, once in uh, maybe twice in a year till about 5 years ago. As time goes by, 2021, I can tell you that I have come across it in at least 10 cases. So, and we aren't even done with 2021 yet. So it's scary. Wrong screen. Okay, so we've given you the basic stuff. Let's complicate life a little bit more. And I'm going to get slightly more technical right now, but I'm going to try and keep it because I'm told that we've got both arts and science students on it. So I'll try not to go into too much jargon. So what do we have? Remember securing a device? How to check for stalkerware. There are almost no ways of checking for stalkerware. But here are some tips that will help you. One is if suddenly your device starts eating up much more battery than it did earlier. So if you know that your device used to give you 1 day worth of battery and is now suddenly giving you maybe 18 hours worth of battery, there is something wrong with that device. One of the things that is wrong could be stalkerware. The second thing that you check for is how much bandwidth is your device using. Now, all devices will give you a history of bandwidth usage. So if you go into, particularly on cell phones, go into settings and check for data usage, it will tell you how much you've been using over the last month or 2 months or whatever it is. If there are sudden spikes, particularly if these sudden spikes are when you are on Wi-Fi. Now, please note, you will know when you are streaming. So when you are looking at stuff like Netflix, Amazon Prime, anything of the kind, it is naturally going to take much more bandwidth, but you know you were doing that. Typically, stalkerware will not use data plans. They will use Wi-Fi connections. So when you do come across spikes in Wi-Fi, again, you know that something is wrong here. Third is when you find that maybe you have new files or folders or pictures that are suddenly visible on your device, which you don't remember clicking. Now, this typically will happen with a bad stalkerware, not with good ones, but it will. Check for your data storage in your device. So you'll know how much data you've used. You'll know if you were yesterday at 20 GB and today at 22 GB. Where did 2 GB worth of data come from? All of these things are likely to give you indications that stalkerware is there in the devices. Unfortunately, the absolutely 100% certain way of knowing if stalkerware exists is to do a forensic examination, which is an expensive process. So that is not an option. But if you feel that these three things are happening, particularly the first and the second, then you know that there is a high chance of stalkerware. Easiest in that case, back up all your data onto a device, maybe even back up all your data onto your Google Cloud, factory reset your device, and reinstall your data. Don't reinstall your apps. Swapnil, your mic is on. Thank you. So, that's how you check for stalkerware. There aren't any guarantees that there is stalkerware or there isn't stalkerware, but most of the symptoms are pretty easy to identify. So keep an eye out for those. And also, and this is something we have been seeing increasingly, so here's a tip. If you are in a relationship that feels uncomfortable, the possibility that stalkerware is one of the reactions of that relationship exists. So take a look at that. All right. Any other questions? Okay. So securing devices finally is the easier task to do. You have password managers which will help, and please use password managers, or at least change your passwords frequently. I'm going to depend on your good memories for that. But that is not enough. And update your systems constantly, but as we know, updates are not always the solution, because even with updates coming in, very often updates come well after a vulnerability has been exploited. So it's often problematic. So we do depend quite a bit on hardware devices. And hardware devices will typically help us protect the network. So some of them are both for networks and for individual systems. Some are purely for networks. So I'm going to lay them out for you, and then you can look at it and ask me questions on it. So one of the first things we need to remember is that networks are laid out in a particular logic pattern. And it's not very easy to see, because finally our network cables go in all directions and it's a bit of a mess. But we've got networks that are laid out in one of these 5 methods most frequently. The bus and the ring are the oldest methods, both very, very problematic, particularly if you end up with any kind of breaks that happen in your base cable. So the way it would work would be, and okay, the mouse is visible. So this is your base cable, your backbone. Hey, come back. And any break in these means that connections are not going to happen. Also, these are very slow to work with, and y'all might not remember because possibly the technology is older than y'all are. But we are all used to today's systems working very fast. Most of us grew up with systems that if they opened a PowerPoint presentation in about 5 minutes, we'd be happy. So today that doesn't work for us at all. What we do today is we use the star topology and modifications of the star topology. So the star is our base method now, where you will have one central device and multiple devices around it, which typically is what you use in your home networks and what you will use even in your Wi-Fi networks. From there, of course, we expand. So we will typically connect a star network to another star network, so on and so forth, until we get the internet as it is today. But when we are talking about security, it doesn't work along these topology systems. When we are talking about security, we are looking at it from a much more a bird's eye view, let us say. So we are trying to protect data. Let's do a very quick exercise. And I don't really want you to write it out here, but if you were to protect something in your house, this could be a person, this could be a product, this could be jewelry, it could be money, it could be whatever it is. What would you be protecting and where would you keep it? Let's not say people, let's just look at it as products. And what would be the most valuable thing in your house? Most likely jewelry, money. Now, in that case, where are you going to keep it? Not near your main door, not near the balconies. You're going to keep this most likely in a room that has complicated means of access. Plus, you're going to put it into maybe a cupboard. Maybe if you have a cupboard with a locker, then into the locker, then the cupboard, so on and so forth. What are you doing here? You're building layers of defense. You're building layers of protection around that item that needs protection. It's like an onion. We keep building a layer after the layer of security. Now, in cybersecurity, we call this defense in depth. This is not by any stretch of imagination a new concept, nor is this a concept that is unique to cybersecurity. This is a concept that has existed for as long as humans have existed, most likely. So it is that, well, if you've ever looked at the Wild West movies and you've seen the way the uh, people reacted when there was maybe an attack, they used to build a circle of their caravans around whatever was there, whatever the position was. Typical ways of defense are you build a circle. That's precisely what we are trying to do here. So, depending on what we want to do, we will complicate the layers that exist. What we are going to look at today are not layers like encryption. We are not going to go into device security in any great detail, but we will look at network security. So the first of, let's leave that and that. Okay, so the first of what we have is the age-old favorite, the antivirus. The antivirus is a favorite for a very logical reason. Malware is probably the most common and probably the most problematic kind of attacks that will happen. As in, it is often the precursor to many major attacks. So what do? It's kind of like getting a cold or a cough, and that needs protection. So from there, you will build outwards. Now, I know that everyone in cybersecurity, including me, is going to tell you buy an antivirus. We don't want you using free antivirus software. We are not objecting to free antivirus software. Please note. Well, actually, we are. But it's not that we are casting aspersions against the software. They are very good. The only reason we say buy an antivirus software is because the paid versions of the software get the updates much more quickly. The free versions take their own sweet time getting the updates. Now, why do we care about the updates? On a daily basis, we have over 1 million malware that are being created. 1 million every day. All of them float around on the internet. So I'm going to tell you about my favorite malware. It's been my favorite forever, possibly because I've actually seen its effects in real time when I was learning computers, etc. I don't know. I think partly also because of the creativity of the virus and because of the backstory. So it's a fun virus. It is called the I Love You virus. I'm going to write it out here. So it's called the I Love You virus. And the I Love You virus is very interesting. In that is precisely what it tells you. It tells you it loves you. You'll get a mail from somebody saying, I love you. Now that's all very well and good. But when this mail comes, when you open the mail, there's a little attachment there which you can open. And that attachment is equally interesting. It is a document which is full of the text, I love you. So, extremely romantic virus. But this is a virus that was very, very problematic for the cybersecurity world, for the internet itself, not the cybersecurity world. Reasons being that this virus came up around 97, 98. So it's about almost 25 years old. It was possibly the most damaging of the malware that existed at that time, as in it affected 80% of the world's systems. So think of it as the coronavirus of computers. It affected 80% of world's computers. It caused damages that were worth $250 240 or 280 million, I don't remember. Some ridiculous figure, which it took about 5 years for them to sort out the damages that the virus had done. And even today, you'll come across the virus sometimes. So suddenly you'll get a pop-up from your antivirus saying, I love you virus detected. It's interesting to see that it still exists. So again, like human viruses, this isn't something that you can eradicate, but it is something that you can vaccinate against. So antivirus software are basically vaccinations. You take them the way you take the coronavirus vaccine. So that's one part of it. Most antivirus software will not at this time be able to deal with complex ransomware, but they will be able to detect and curb activities of most common ransomware. So I'm sure you've all heard of WannaCry. A fun little ransomware ended up in the news, lots and lots of. So the way things are going today, WannaCry is the least problematic of the ransomware that exist, but it's problematic enough. So some kinds of ransomware will be detected by antivirus, not all. Where am I? Here, wrong screen. So, okay. The next is what is called a firewall. And a firewall is kind of like, I don't know, kind of like my grandmother used to be. So I don't know if you all have similar experiences, but anyway, my grandmother was this formidable creature. Very interesting because she was tiny. She was about 4 feet 7 inches, so she was really tiny. And but she was this very scary firebrand. So when anyone came to meet us, they had to go through this whole series of questions before they could meet us. Who are you? Where have you come from? Why have you come? How long are you going to stay? What do you plan to do? Who are your parents? What do your parents do? Which part of the city do you stay? Etc. 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 Whole bunch of questions. If this person did not meet her standards, the person was not permitted in. Now that is what a firewall does. The firewall is basically going to say that I have a set of rules that exist, and if you meet the requirements of those rules, you may go in. If you don't meet the requirements of those rules, sorry very much, but you can't enter. So it's a very polite piece of software, maybe. So what does it do? I'm not going to show you any of that. Let us go straight to, there we go. So we've got this firewall, which says that on this particular port, 51413, TCP and UDP should be allowed or should not be allowed. Now, these are two kinds of protocols that exist. This is one of the many ports that exists on every machine. And it is basically saying that, okay, you may enter from here or you may not enter from here. Now, in the same way, we had this window. And this window used to be fun because it looked out into the compound behind my house where our closest friends used to stay. And we used to hop in and out of that window all the time. Except that at certain times when we had breached curfew, if we were supposed to be home by 5 o'clock and we weren't home at 5, my very frightening grandmother would close the window. So we couldn't sneak into the house. We had to come in from the main door, at which time, of course, she knew we were coming in. That's your firewall. In every sense of the word, that is what a firewall does. So it will have different rules, different levels of activity. So this is the Windows 10 firewall, part of Bitdefender, which tells you what all can be enabled and what all can be disabled. Now, I know over here it says remote assistance is enabled for work devices, but it is best to keep this disabled. You Need it on, you go into the permissions, turn it on, and work with it. Once you're done, turn it off. The next is what is called the intrusion detection system. Now, the intrusion detection system is very, very interesting. The intrusion detection system's job is basically to say, an intruder has come in. It's not going to stop the intruder from coming in. It is not going to do anything to slow the intruder down. All it is going to do is it is going to tell you that an intruder has come. That's it. So it is in many ways like many of the security guards that you would see in malls or anything of the kind. Ever wondered that every time we go to a restaurant, we go to a mall, not a restaurant, but every time we go to a mall or to the movie theater or something like that, they scan our bags. They're looking for weapons, bombs. What will they do if they find one? Probably not too much. Mostly because they might not be trained. Now, if they are trained, and if they actually respond to it, sorry, they will shift into what is called an intrusion prevention system. We'll get back to those pictures in a bit. An intrusion prevention system is the smarter of the two. As in, it says, okay, intruder detected, let's deal with the intruder. So it's going to start off with basic measures of protection, while at the same time alerting the command and control center, saying that there is an intruder, please take action. Now, think of it in this way. I had, a few months ago, I asked this friend of mine, one of the many defense people I was meeting. We had gone out for dinner, and at this place we were going, they stopped us, checked the car for bombs, etc., etc. They said, what if at some point of time there is a bomb? What do these people do? So the logic behind it is that if at this time they do detect the bomb, if at this time they do respond to the bomb, one of two things will happen. Either the person carrying the bomb is going to run away and maybe come back a later time, or this person is probably going to detonate the device at the gate, which will minimize damage. That is what your intrusion prevention system is supposed to do. Now, these are things that we can install on individual machines as well. So where? Let us find you a decent picture. Okay. We've got your external network, the internet itself, and we've got one intrusion detection system that is right beyond that. So just past your router is where you store an IDS. Anything coming in has to go through the IDS and will give you an alert. Ideally, you might have a firewall here. You might not have a second IDS, but you will definitely have a firewall between your network and your computers. Here. The IDS ideally should be before the firewall, because like I said, the firewall just asks a series of questions. If permissions are granted, it will let them in. So this can be your IDS or your IPS. Now, I'm not going to bore you too much with these people because they can be slightly tedious, but we've got this fun one. We've got this thing called a honeypot. You've read things in the papers about how a senior government official was lured into a honey trap, or Jawan of the Indian Army was lured into a honey trap. Typically, someone they met online. We do exactly the same kind of thing. So a honeypot or a honey trap is something interesting looking, something that seems nice, something that seems to be exactly what your network is like, where attackers will come and attack. Now, of course, many attackers can detect honeypots if they are badly created. But if you are doing a good job of it, they'll first come to the honeypot. Now, here's the fun part. With the honeypot, we do two things. We detect the kind of method of attack that these people are using. And by using that information, it allows us to make our networks much stronger. So we know that, okay, this window is where they're going to attack from. So we strengthen that window. We know that this door is where they are pretending to attack from. So we don't need to keep as much protection against that door. It helps us improve security. Second, it tells us what they already know. So because it tells us what they already know, we can find leaks within our systems. The third interesting thing that it does, or rather that we do with it, so it doesn't really count as a third, is sometimes you can use the honeypot to retrace steps to identify the attacker, which can be a lot of work, which can also be a lot of fun. So by the information that you get within the honeypot, you might be able to track back to a potential attacker and then prevent the attacks from happening, maybe even get them jailed. Now, all of these things are good fun, but we also have another good fun one, which is called a content filter. Now, content filter is a bit of a nuisance. It can be good, it can be very, very problematic. So a content filter will generally look at stuff and it will say, okay, this kind of content is permitted and this kind is not. So let's give you an example of, let's say you are trying to send somebody an email and this person is in the company, in his or her own company. Now the email you are sending out is a gender-based survey. Now while making this gender-based survey, let's say we are looking at number of women in cybersecurity in a company, which is abysmal, maybe one in a team of 15, 20, 30. So if we are lucky. Anyway, that's a different story altogether. So let's say we've sent out this gender-based survey, which will, of course, contain words like male, female, sex, gender, etc. Now, if the company has a content filter that is going to restrict these words, nothing will reach the person who was supposed to get the mail. If, on the other hand, you have a bad content filter, a lot of data from within the company might find its way out. So one of the classic things that a company will set up as on their content filter is for it to pick the word confidential. Because many companies, many companies will mark certain documents as confidential and they don't want those documents being sent out. So if those documents are being sent out, the content filter will find the word confidential and will not let those mails out at all. Now, while all of these things exist and they are all absolutely technology based, how do they work? And how they work is actually a study in psychology. So let's get to that. Okay. What are they looking for? The first is what is called a behavior analysis. And they're basically trying to see what behavior something is going to do. So it categorizes things into good behavior and bad behavior. Or more correctly, good behavior and worrying behavior. Now, if it is good behavior, it's not going to find anything wrong with that item. If it is worrying behavior, it's going to say that this possibly is a malware and I'm going to isolate it, which is called quarantining, or I am going to get rid of it completely, at which time your software is going to tell you Files 1, 2, 3 destroyed. That's because of behavior. Here's the fun part. How does it identify or learn what behavior is good and what behavior is bad? So it learns this over the period of time. It will ask you questions because maybe your system has a different behavior pattern from my system. I'll give you an example. Once in a very rare while, I need to investigate things that are, let's call them offensive, for want of a better word. And now, if that offensive content is, I see it, it's my job. So it's part of the normal behavior pattern. But if that same offensive content were to come onto the system of a guest who is in my house, what do you think is going to happen? Other than, of course, the fact that my reputation will effectively be in shreds, but it could be very offensive to the person who is seeing it. So on their system, this kind of content would be categorized as inappropriate or offensive behavior. The next is what is called signature analysis. Now, signature analysis assumes that a particular file, a particular program is problematic for everyone. So, whereas in the first case, the behavior pattern assumes individuality, the second one, signature analysis, does not assume individuality. It is a blanket statement kind of thing. Accepted, not accepted. That's it. So if it is something that works fine, it will say this is good, accept it. If it feels that this particular file, this particular software that is coming in matches a pattern of something that it has found offensive, it will automatically mark it out for you. Now let's give you an example. And this is something that I want you all to tell me how you all do. You are alone at the railway station or bus stop. It is late at night. It's about 12:30, maybe 1 at night. You are expecting a bus or a train to come, which is supposed to take you to your destination. But you don't know who to ask if this bus train has been delayed or if it is going to come. Now what you see is two people. Two people. One person is dressed in formal trousers, formal shirt, has a laptop bag, the sling laptop bag, and is standing there. The other person is dressed in torn jeans, has a leather jacket, has tattoos, and has this rather decrepit haversack that this person is carrying. Of these two, person A and person B, who are you most likely to approach with a question? Keep the background information in mind. It's middle of the night, you're alone at the bus stop, railway station, whatever you feel like. These are the only two people who are there who can provide you with information. Who would you approach? Let's wait for the couple more responses. So 5 people, all 5 person A. Okay, let's add some parameters now. The person who is, let's say person A again, is smoking a cigarette, smelling a little bit of alcohol, and is not walking straight. Whereas person B is reading a book. Now, which of the two people would you approach? Does it change your opinion? Okay. So let's see what we did here. In the first case, we looked at our own opinions of the people. We assume, without doubt, that this person who has come nicely packaged, formal trousers, formal tucked in shirt, laptop bag, neat, clean looking person, is likely to be the more approachable or is likely to be the nicer of the two people. Nicer might be a bit of a problem, the safer of the two people. Until we added the new parameters, which was that this person was smoking, which in itself not such a big red flag, but the person was smelling of stale alcohol. Now that is a red flag. Whereas person B was reading a book. What have we done here? We've gone from signature analysis, which has given us a default binary bracketing, to looking at behavior analysis and saying that, okay, if this is what this file is doing, then this file is likely to be safer than the file that is not doing these things. That's the same thing that we do. You've also taken into account your own experiences without really thinking about it consciously. Please note also that at no point of time did I give you the gender of either of the two people. We've got two people. Nor did you choose to ask me the gender of these two people. So gender finally does not make a difference. In exactly the same way, what the file is made up of does not make a difference. What we are interested in is what will the file do? How will it behave in my system? That is what is so scary on the internet. Because absolutely nice, decent looking files might behave in a completely mad manner once they enter your system, which is where you've got something like ransomware. Now, ransomware comes into your system looking like a very civilized little piece of software. But once it comes into your system, it starts trying to do things. So what it's trying to do is it's trying to encrypt your data. Now, while trying to encrypt your data, it's going to pick certain files and start encrypting them, which of course could be a purely legitimate user reaction, but it might not be. So what your software do is they're going to say that, okay, based on this pattern, we see that this particular software has given a command of encryption. Let's pause it. Let's confirm with the user that this is something that the user has commanded and not something that is being done because the software is malicious. That's where you go into pattern analysis, which is going to say that, okay, or what we even do when we are looking at attack patterns. So we know that certain countries get attacked more by certain other countries. We know that possibly some of the most active attackers are North Korean attackers. So any traffic coming from North Korea is automatically suspected, even if it's totally nice looking traffic. But at the same time, if we've got the same file coming in 5 times, it's suspicious. So patterns will vary, but based on patterns, you can do a lot more detailed analysis than you could otherwise. Again, finally, you've got content, which is if it contains a certain kind of code, if it contains a certain kind of file, if like many malware creators do, they have signed their malware, you look for the signature and you know that this is something that it's part of the content. So you identify maliciousness in that manner. So these are all actually very, very simple pieces of technology. They just sound complex. Computer people like making them sound a lot more complex. We all do that. We love the sense of importance it gives us. But in a sense, they are very simple logical devices, something that we should all use as often as possible. All right. Questions? I sped things up and cut out a few things because I can hear what sounds like a helicopter. Not sure. Khade ma'am, if you have turned your mic on, we can't hear you.
I think you had asked a question.
Khade ma'am?
Can you hear?
Now I can hear you, yes.
You are asking a question to the students, I think.
No, I was asking if they have any questions.
Okay. The students, please ask. They were typing something on the chat box, I think.
That was in response to the behavior pattern that I had asked them to
A and B, that A and B.
Yes.
He's asking.
Ashish, cloud storage. Can I give you an answer that says yes and no without offending you? So it is safe to an extent. Cloud storage, like everything else, can definitely be breached. So we've seen even things like iCloud being breached. In fact, a whole lot of content of the iCloud was made public a few years ago. Some fairly scandalous stuff. But the fact is that cloud storage is not very easy to breach. It could happen at some point of time. So if you've got very sensitive information that you want to store on cloud, I would say encrypt it and then store it on cloud. Also, there is always a possibility that you will lose your data even if it is on the cloud. I know that we store it on cloud because we don't want to lose the data, but that is a possibility, not a very great possibility, but it is definitely a possibility. So don't assume that cloud is 100% secure. I would say that cloud is more secure than an individual system is. Ashish is at some point of time going to find me and beat me up. So, any other questions? Again, not easily. I mean, of course, if you've saved passwords like 123456, or you've got your passwords written down somewhere, or at some point of time you've logged in from an unsafe account, then yes, they can be breached very easily. But if you're following the basic security precautions, I would think would be the correct word, of good passwords, changing the passwords frequently, using two-factor authentication, and keeping your basic security settings intact for each account, then it shouldn't be very easy to hack into. And yes, I know that one of the major requests that all of us people in cybersecurity get is, can you hack into my girlfriend's account? Can you hack into my boyfriend's account? I think my girlfriend is cheating on me. Can you check? Other kinds of stuff. It isn't as easy as many people make it sound. Also, it's very, very offensive to do something like that. But I don't think that's why Ashish was asking. So yes, there is the IT Act that came up in the year 2000. It was amended in 2008. It was again amended this year. This year, it was amended to include what is called I think it's called the OTT Law, basically for all of your intermediaries like Twitter, Netflix, all of that. The law does take into account cyber crimes, So we've got section 43 and section 66, which particularly address the crimes themselves. 43 deals with civil offenses and 66 with the criminal offenses. So effectively the same offense, but taking into account things like motive, intent, those kinds of things. We also look at the CRPC and the IPC when dealing with cybercrimes. Okay, before I forget, you all have it on the slides, but I'll put it in the chat box as well. Email address and phone number, just in case you ever feel like you need to get in touch with me. Okay, more questions, or then we'll hand it over to Khare ma'am.
Any questions? Anyone? So, ma'am, this problem of the governments having their own agendas, like how to, if anyone comments anything on an issue like this helicopter crash which was there, General Rawat. So if anyone has, now we say freedom of speech is there. So how do they like get down to this kind of thing where they object about people saying something? So in that there is it related to the law or?
Yes and no again.
Okay.
A fair amount of the questions, I mean, a fair amount of the people taking offense are trolls.
Okay.
At which point of time they are the ones committing the crime by trolling. But it is very difficult to deal with trolls because you'll never end up with one person trolling you. It's kind of like a mob attack where you will end
Yes,
up with
yes.
lots of people being extremely offensive online.
Yes.
At which time there's very little you can do except for maybe just get off that service for the while.
Okay.
On the other hand, if of course a comment that you have made is in any way legally objectionable,
Okay.
then yes, the government can certainly take action. Unfortunately, the governments increasingly around the world are getting more sensitive towards
Yes. Yes.
criticism against themselves.
Yes.
And so they are dealing with that in an extremely harsh manner. But, and technology unfortunately aids them in doing that. But I think if you're within the laws, sure, there's a whole lot that we can
Yes.
say.
There's one more question, I think, when I was asking that one student said something. Karkirkar or
Yes, Aljit has a question about mobile hotspots. Again, same logic applies. If your mobile hotspot is protected, so if any kind of a hotspot, mobile or Wi-Fi, take care of two things. One is make sure that it is not broadcasting its name. So you don't want everyone to know that your mobile hotspot is called Aljit Mobile.
yeah.
You don't want it to be called anything else either. So you don't want it announcing itself. So hide the SSID. Second is make sure that you've changed the default password. All Wi-Fi routers as well as all SSIDs come with a default password, including mobile hotspots. Typically, it is unfortunately something like admin1234 for the password or some stupid thing like that. Change that. Also, don't go around telling everybody what your mobile hotspot or your Wi-Fi passwords are. So, Amish, yes, password managers are safe. The simple reason I can say so is because they encrypt all your passwords and store those. The encryption can be broken only by the extremely large password that you would keep to protect the manager itself. Siley ma'am, Meta, well, Facebook has possibly the worst track record when it comes to privacy. They have no consideration whatsoever for privacy. And shifting it to Meta has made it much worse. They do sell individual data all the time. There's no question of it. All data plus telemetry is sold to advertising agencies. It doesn't help. What is also getting really bad is that sites like Facebook and other kinds of sites are using pictures and so our pictures and are feeding those to countries that are surveilling their citizens. So whenever you've got these large CCTV cameras put up all over the country, sorry, Ashish, give me a second. So these CCTV cameras put up all over the country, which are pretty much picking facial recognition data, it is being used to track, and things like Facebook do sell pictures. So that much more of a breach of privacy. Yes, Ashish. Siley ma'am, I don't know if I've answered your question in entirety, but it's very often sold to governments. In fact, most governments are the largest buyers of all of this kind of content from telemetry sites, from Facebook, Gmail, Facebook, Google, Microsoft, Apple. So the largest amount of content is bought by government agencies. Yes, Ashish.
Hello, ma'am. Like we see a lot of time that people just randomly just fake accuse people on social media, like they upload their photos or something like that without their permission and all. So,
Correct.
what would be the first way to deal with it, and in how long period that such issues would be resolved?
So now it depends on how you want to do the resolution. If your resolution is by purely legal channels, which is going to court and all of those things, it might take you 10, 15 years. But there are simpler ways to do it, which are still legal. So the first is when you get, so pretty much with any kind of a cybercrime, take screenshots. Whatever it is, take screenshots. If it is a social media based crime, get your friends to take screenshots as well. And as a collective, first report that to the site itself. So if it's Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, whatever it is, report the offense to them with the supporting screenshots. Second, file a complaint at your local cyber cell with the screenshots. You might choose not to pursue the legal angle later. But the moment you file a complaint, the police department will also put a lot more pressure on the social media site to pull that content down. Again, they might choose to track the person down, they might choose not to. It could be that it's a fake account, it could be that it's an account sitting in a different country. So there are a whole lot of complications, but it is also possible to do a tracking. So it depends on the direction you want to take, Ashish. But first step is take screenshots. Second step is report it.
Thank you, ma'am.
What you do not do is do not take them on. So don't get into an argument with them. Don't get, if they are trolling you, don't respond to those messages, because that will invariably escalate the matter. Kalu, you had a question? In the meantime, we'll...
Good afternoon, ma'am.
Good
Hello.
afternoon, Bolo.
I am a senior citizen now studying in MA English in Norjiwade College.
Oh, lovely. Okay.
So I am not so savvy about this computer technology, but I am learning now. What is my difficulty is whenever I used to operate my system, especially taking notes and everything, I find that there is a lot of advertisement coming and interrupting my task. So, is there any system to bar this advertisement? This is one question, and the another question is this: another question
So
is
the
this,
second question?
another very important question. Whatever you are now taught now, ma'am, can I get that copy?
The slides are going to be shared with you all. So to answer your first question regarding the ads, there are two things you can do. You'll still get some ads, but at least you can reduce the number of ads. The first is on your browser, keep deleting the cookies. So go into your browser settings and delete cookies. Word of caution, if you've logged into email accounts from your browsers, then please make sure you know the password before you delete it, because it's going to log you out of your email accounts.
Right.
Second is there are things called ad blocks, which are what is the addition to a browser called? I suddenly cannot remember it. Plugins. It's a plugin that you will get for your browsers, and you can use those. They will block ads. If you are working on an Android device, so if it's a cell phone or a tablet, then go into your settings, go into Google, and over there it will give you an option that says ads. Over there, go and reset the advertising ID, as well as select the I'll just tell you what it is called.
Adblock extension, ma'am.
Adblock extension, yes, but I'm looking for that word on Google. What is it called? Opt out of ads personalization. So activate that, so it will not give you personalized ads. It will keep giving you, at least it will now give you random ads. Okay, let's see. DigiLocker is fairly safe. They're using cloud systems, and the security and encryption on DigiLocker is actually pretty good. So it's a good place to store your documents. So, Arjit, privacy and national security are two things that are constantly fighting with each other. And most countries will opt in favor of national security over privacy. Citizens' privacy is something that most countries don't care too much about. So, yeah, Shubham, thanks for the ad block extension. Utkarsh, yes, Google Drive is safe. Again, the same measures apply. So passwords, etc., and you should be fine. So, yes, privacy effectively is a myth. And on the internet, definitely. So the internet itself is not geared towards privacy. The way the technology is built, the technology aids criminals and aids in surveillance. There's no question of it. There is also the fact that we cannot move without our devices anymore. And if we don't have a cell phone within 1 foot of us, it kind of stresses us out. So, yeah, I guess privacy would definitely be a myth. Okay, more questions or anything else that you would like discussed?
Okay, I think we can, students can ask you more questions on the email.
Oh, perfect. Yes. WhatsApp works better. Email, I am not exactly very quick on because I typically get about 200 emails a day.
Yeah,
So,
yeah. Okay, on your website, then you're saying
no, WhatsApp works fine. Just send me a WhatsApp
WhatsApp.
message on my phone number.
Okay. And okay, thank you, ma'am. I request Sagar sir to kindly take over.
Thank you, ma'am, for this enlightening lecture. It was an interesting talk, and you made it really easy for all of us to understand. And an apology for the technical glitch that we had in the beginning. I would also like to thank our principal, Dr. P.K. Badani, for his guidance and support, and Khare ma'am for organizing such a wonderful session. Finally, thanks to the students for being interactive and attentive audience, and for asking some sensible questions in the end. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you. And Sagar sir, glitches happen all the time. Don't worry.
Yes.
Yes,
And I
ma'am.
think we can meet on house. We'll be meeting on 17th.
So, Mayur, let me answer that question of yours offline, away from class. Maybe on WhatsApp or Telegram or Signal. Either works for me. So,
Which question is this?
so Mayur has asked a question about whether WhatsApp is sharing our data or not. But simply, WhatsApp is a meta tool, and we know where meta is heading. So, I think that should answer your question. So, all right. Ma'am, who is meeting on the 17th?
17th, the 17th is Friday, and for part 1 student introductory
Okay.
lecture on
Perfect.
cybersecurity 1. We decided about
That sounds good. Yes.
And will it be okay now? I'll share this PPT.
Yes, please. Please go ahead and share it.
Okay.
Actually, don't share it yet. I detected that there were a couple of typos. Let me correct those and send it to you in a little while and then share it.
Okay. And I think Sagar sir will be uploading this talk on YouTube also.
Not a problem at all.
So I hope that's okay.
Absolutely, ma'am. No problem.
Okay. Thanks a lot.
All right. Thank you. Bye bye.
Bye.